Okay, second panel of the weekend then, and this is of course Ocean software from various eras, and again, first thing we'll do is just go along the line and get a brief intro of who everyone is and what they did at Ocean. So I overran on purpose, by the way, because I saw Jim running in the corridor about 15 minutes past 12, didn't you? Supposed to start at 12, but never mind. We'll start that then.
I am Paul Owens. I'm sort of one of the early guys. We started as Spectrum Games before we turned into Ocean. Wrote a few games for the Spectrum, Daily Thompson's, Hunchback, a few others. Left the company just before Infogrames, about probably 3 or 4 years, so I was there a good 13 years, and did a lot of different things in the company while I was there. So.
Hi, I'm Matthew Cannon. I was working as an audio programmer, musician, whatever you call it, from about 88 till 92, I think. Worked on 8-bit machines, started moving on when the 16-bit machines came in, and worked on several titles. Had a great time.
Hi, I'm Phil Trelford. I worked in Ocean in the 16-bit era, so towards the tail end, and I worked on titles like Jurassic Park and Adam's Family.
Alright, I'm Mark Jones. I was known as Mark Jones Jr. at Ocean because there was 2 of us. I started in beginning of '87, worked on the Spectrum version of Whizball, Grisor, Vindicator, and then there was Rambo 3 on the 16 bits and the Total Recall mess on the 16-bit in Spectrum as well. You could have a whole talk on that, couldn't you, really, if you wanted to?
Oh, yes.
And on to Simon.
Right, Simon Butler. I did a lot of external work for Ocean. Worked for them twice, 6 to 8 years in total, I think, before getting shown the door 25 years ago. Had a whale of a time, and over to Jim.
I'm Jim Bagley. Although I didn't actually work for Ocean, I've done 11 games for them, so I'm sort of an honourable member. I've worked on Guts, Cabal, Midnight Resistance, Batman Cape Crusader and Hudson Hawk on various platforms.
Yes. Now, I said this to Newsfield, it's a little over a year ago. Some of us anyway were sat here doing this same thing, so I'm just wondering what it is that keeps people like Mark, Simon, who were here last year, Jim, coming back, because, I mean, me personally and the fans would love to think that this part of your career was brilliant, it's the best time you've ever had, and you still love doing it to this day, but really it's 30 years ago, and it's probably just a small part of what is obviously a long and fairly successful career, so what keeps bringing you back?
Actually, it's good to see the guys. I mean, every time I come back and I thought, geez, the memories go with it, does when you get to 50. And we did have a good time. You couldn't really do it today, and I do look back fondly on it. It was hard work, don't get me wrong. We used to, sometimes in the early days, we would do 48-hour stretches trying to cut stuff out and get it out to the distributors or get it down to Ablex, which is just down the road. But yeah, no, it was good times, and it's good to see the guys, and it reminds me, it actually cheers me up. This is my first one I've come to, but no, I just enjoy it, I think.
Yeah, this is the second time I've been to an event like this, and I just enjoy seeing, well, first of all, people I used to work with, colleagues, brings back good memories. Thinking back to the titles we worked on, the different machines we worked on, the good times, the bad times, the stressful times, the exciting times, and then walking around looking at all the machines and some of the machines that are running the titles that you might have been involved in. It's just nice to see, and yeah, it's good to reminisce. Is obviously a part of it is nostalgia, but yeah, it's as Paul said, it's hard to remember a lot of what went on, but hopefully we can answer some of your questions today. Sure, we've all got different viewpoints, different perspectives on what it was like. I was very young when I started working at Ocean. I was only 16 years old. So these guys were, I already knew about people like Simon and Mark and Paul because I bought their games. So my perspective might be a little bit different. I think it's similar to Mark in that I think you were quite, these guys were, you looked up to these guys, didn't you? Because you you knew all about their work before you started. Not for long, you got to know them, yeah. But it was the same for me, so and I like to come back to these events to remind myself of where I started working in IT and in video games, and see where it is today, and see all you guys with your enthusiasm.
Yeah, no, it's great to remember those times. This particular time in the games industry with Ocean, at that period you could do a game in 6 months, and it was really fun and really creative. Simon's just said 6, and as the years went by, we're getting up to some of the games I worked on like 10 years later take a year and a half, 2 years, and that was quite a long, drawn-out process. And these were the exciting, creative times where you'd crunch and very quickly get out that game, move on to another one. So happy times, lots of fun, drinking and socialising as well.
There's a drinking thing developing over the course of the morning.
Yeah.
And swearing.
Yeah, mine was, I was 16 when I started at Ocean, so like Simon was almost like my surrogate dad. We moved away from home for the first time.
That was Colin Parr.
No, that was everybody's dad. But when Simon turned up for work, I was like, oh, I know, I've heard of Simon, because I as a schoolboy, I bought Cosmic Wartoad and Never Ending Story and Nomad on the Spectrum, so I knew who he was. And when John Rittman turned up, I was like, oh, so John Rittman came into work today. Saw his new game, Foot on the Mouth. So basically, just these events are really good because I get to see these lot again. We hadn't any idea. I hadn't got any idea when I was 16 that 25 years later we'd be sat here talking about them again. It was just done and dusted, and that was it. It was over. That's what we thought back then, but it was not true. And it's also good as well speaking to people who were used to play our games, because back then we never heard from them. We didn't know who was playing our games. It just went out on the shelf, and that was it. So it's good at these shows when people come up and they go, oh, I was 15 and playing Gryzo on the Spectrum. It's nice to hear little things like that, so that's my reasons.
Shout at him, Simon. There's a mobile phone then.
Oh, terrible. I keep coming back for the drugs and the dirty women, and they're still not here. So, I come back because I enjoy these, events, these sort of jamborees. It's good to see that everybody seems to like what we did back then. I've said it in Q&As, and I've said in Anthony's documentary that I don't think any of us saw it as a career. Now, especially the younger guys, they were straight from school, so they were just doing something that they'd been playing at. They might have been like bedroom coding or doing a bit of graphics at home. But suddenly they found they were getting paid for it. And none of us thought, oh, I'm going to be doing this for the next 30 years. And it's turned into something that you all, that means something different to every single person in this room. Some of you are 64 boys, some of you are Spectrum guys, and some of you are probably Amstrad boys and girls. But we never thought for 1 second that it was going to last this long. Not for a heartbeat. And again, I've gone on record that if David Ward had just walked in the next day, or Gary Bracey, and said, sorry boys, the doors are closing, we would have all gone, oh, fuck sticks. And then that would have been it, and we would have walked out. But we would have battered an eyelid, we just would have moved on. It's not like today's industry where you suddenly say, oh right, Sony Liverpool are getting rid of half their workforce, and everybody's sort of wearing hair shirts and tearing their hair out, and oh, it's the end of the world, Because these days it seems to have bigger ramifications, because obviously they're spending more money on stuff. But by the same sort of yardstick, we were spending similar amounts of money. The money that they were spending there, the thousands or the millions that they're spending today. But like I say, it was just something we did, and it's lasted. Again, I'll paraphrase myself, the ripples of what we did then are still moving out. They still are. The things we did 25, 30 years ago, people are cloning now for apps on your mobile phone. They're cloning for Steam. There's probably more pixel games coming out every week these days than there have been in the last 10 years. And we started that.
pretty much the same as what all the other guys have said. I like coming to these shows, to meet up with the workmates again, and I know quite a few of you in the audience as well, so it's good to have a catch up and chat with you guys. It's kind of enjoyable, and it pulls at heartstrings sometimes, like when you've had comments from people that said, this is some guy in Greece, which at the time I didn't even know they shipped games out to Greece. I thought it was just in the UK, but I was only a kid then. And I got an email from this guy saying he grew up playing my games, and he'd had a bad childhood, but playing the games was his only escape. And that kind of thing was like, wow, you didn't realise anything like that. You were just making a game, like Sam said. It was just, you made a game, you went on to the next one. You didn't think about the impact that these games were having on people's lives. And I think it's great. That's why I come and have a chat with all of you.
Well, this is for anyone really who wants to comment on it, but what was it in particular, do you think, about Ocean, if anything? Was it the way the company operated sort of that came down from the top downwards, or was it that you were taking on 16-year-olds like Mark and Matthew, or was it that you had people who knew the kind of industry, although it was only young, like Colin? What do you think it was about Ocean in particular?
Well, I found myself in there, so I can't really answer that. But I used to interview a lot of the young guys that used to come from, especially in the early 80s, and I'd always ask them, why do you want to work here? And they just, it's Ocean, it's great, it's brilliant. And there was one young lad, and we used to give them sort of a kind of logic test if they were programmers. So you basically try, you don't care that they're qualified or whatever. I mean, I started as a chemist, and unfortunately I blew the lab up, which is why I started writing computer games. Yeah, I know I'm going off topic here, but it wasn't really my fault. And, yeah, well, it was coming, I'll take a couple of minutes. It was coming up to bonfire night, and one of the lads in the lab said, Paul, can you do gunpowdery stuff? So I said, yeah. So I made a small Nescafe jar of gunpowder, and we tried sort of different combinations and that. And we worked in a rubber plant, and my job was to go around and check on all the rubber and make sure that the samples were good and everything. So I'd left this jar in my drawer. He opened the drawer whilst I was out. He took a little pen top and he put it on the side of the desk and he lit it, and it went poof, and then fell into the big jar that then went poof. I come back with my clipboard, and literally the lab, which was a separate unit, was on fire. And I got fired from that, and I thought, right, what am I going to do for a job? And that's how I got into it, really. Sorry, what was the question? Oh, why was it? Yeah, so I used to interview young lads, and
Rephrase that.
I did have a girl once, but she got the wrong office. She'd come from a typist job with the solicitors next door, but I interviewed her anyway because she was cute. And the thing that they mainly said was about Ocean. He says, you're all, stars, it's brilliant. And there was one young lad, I said, well, actually it's not, it's just a job. We're 9 to 5, so, well, not 9 till 5, but we work hard and it's just a serious job. And I come out, and I think we were doing the BBC 2 documentary at the time, and Bill Barner puts his head round with this gorilla mask on and went, hey, la, la. And the lad just stood around and goes, yeah, I definitely want to work here.
Anybody else?
Yeah, anybody else?
Ocean bought their success. They had more money than anyone else, but they also had industry savvy. It's actually in the Ocean book, and it's probably on somewhere on the many hours of film that Anthony has done for the documentary. John has said that Ocean was just a business, just yet another business that they were trying to see if this one would succeed. And it did. They had the industry know-how. Once again, I can only paraphrase myself. They had no idea what was going on downstairs, and neither did we. Neither did Gary Briggs. None of us knew what we were doing. We were making it up from minute to minute, because we had no point of reference. There were no forerunners It's a phrase, you know, that I always make excuses for. We were the avant-garde. We were the first line. There was no one we could phone up and say, what piece of software do I use? I don't know, I'm using the same as you. It's the first piece of software. How do I animate an 8-frame walk? Bugged if I know. Yeah. I was going to ask you. So, Ocean, you gravitated towards Ocean. I mean, I'd worked for them prior to working in-house. And I quit the industry because the company I was working for was just churning out garbage. And Gary Bracey called me the next day and just said, I believe you quit. Come and have a talk. So 2 days later I was working at Ocean. But when I said, you know, inflammatory comments, Ocean bought the success, they did. Of course they did. They bought the best people. They bought the best advertising. They bought their weight. They bought reviews. They actually paid for, you know, an 8 out of 10 rather than a 6 out of 10, because if you don't give us that 8 out of 10, we're not giving you any advertising next year. You know, it's as simple as that. But that was just part of the course. Ocean Games, pretty much. They had some stellar games. They had more than their fair share of garbage. I know because I've worked there. Pretty much all my Ocean titles are absolute dross, with 1 or 2 exceptions. My outer house work is just shameful. It just is. But that was the industry. But it was also proven point that someone like Ocean could actually place one of my turds fairly high in the charts. You know, and it would generate sales that for a week or so before people went, oh my God, what have I bought? You know, that's my pocket money for a month, gone. You know, on this absolute donkey. But that was it. Ocean were the biggest and the best, and they basically crushed anyone who got in their way. They just did. And anyone with any sense in the industry, you know, coders, artists, or even higher ups, the faceless suits, they gravitated towards Ocean because success attracts the best people. Well, we're some of the best, and we're still here.
Yeah. That way.
You know, I'll agree with Simon there. The draw for Ocean was the big name, the ability to get lots of copies out there to be able to produce something that everybody gets to see. I worked with Bullfrog and the Creative Assembly and Psygnosis before I turned up at Ocean. But the reputation that Ocean had was a huge pull. There was a kind of a dual feeling in the industry. One was that Ocean was huge and amazing and a great place to work, which it was. I guess the other side of it was there was a bit of Mickey taking on the side of the movie licenses, that it was very heavily based on that. But I actually found, in a way, we were given the movie licenses, but there was quite a lot of creative freedom around what we did with those. So in effect, you're just given a title and a rough storyline, and you weave something magical out of that. So it was pretty exciting.
I agree with Simon when he says there were no forerunners. You know, if you wanted a tape loader, you had to write your own, and Ocean wrote them. Was it Paul Hughes that wrote yours? Tape loader. Was it? Oh, was it you? Sorry, I do apologise. So, do you want to talk about that? How that came about? Why you needed it? How you developed it?
Yeah. Well, there was quite a few things really. I think the first point was that in very early days I wrote a game called Kong, and it was sort of one of our first ones, and it involved Spectral Games, but we released it on Ocean. And I walked into Smith's one day and somebody found this Execute 234 whatever, and it just left scrolling bars on the side of the screen in this computer that was on display in W.H. Smith's. And that was alright, except for it said please wait while Kong loads. And I just sort of realised that, you know, it does take an age to do that, and that was one of the problems. And the second one was that we were starting to see these tapes sort of come at in the market and being sold as pirate tapes. Very early days, literally you'd be out in a week and then you'd go to Newtonheath Market or wherever, and there's a bunch of Kongs with purple faces rather than red than the right colour and all this kind of thing. So we were seeing, even in our local markets, that the pirates were in there pretty quick. So we had an idea to try and do something about it, and there was a tape system out there. I forget what it was called now. There was like 7 versions of it. Speedlot, yeah. But they charged an arm and a leg. Every tape they wanted a certain number of pence, and we were making these tapes for not peanuts, but the actual manufacture of the tapes was probably 60p. The investment to develop the code and everything else was what created the difference, and then Smiths took 50% of it or whatever it was. But we were struggling with margin. We were struggling to actually really make the numbers that we knew we could. So Ablex, which is just down the road here at Trelford, there was a cracking guy worked there who was I forget his name now, so it's got gone. But they had all this audio kit, so I started writing something really that just was a square waveform. And the idea is you make a longer square waveform in a shorter one. And the idea was to try and say, well, you have to have a really very high quality hi-fi to stop rounding these square waveforms off from copying a duplicated tape. And what is the limit that we can reasonably expect? So if you had a good tape and you stuck it into one of your own little cassettes, it'd work, but if you tried to copy it with those little cassettes, it would round the waveform off, and it didn't. And we worked for a couple of months on that, and then eventually we come up with it, and well, they don't call me Buggy Owens for nothing. They didn't quite work for the first time. Anybody who knows Joffa used to call me Buggy Owens, but anyway. So, but we got there. We got there in the end. We had to trash 50,000 in the first batch. But, so, and then we used it, but it became less and less because what started to happen was that there were some more professional people, and they did get the hi-fi copy of the kit, and they did get the artwork right on the copies. So we reckon we were losing about 60% of our revenue through this. So yeah, that was it.
Just on the point of the loaders, well, yeah, Paul Hughes came in and did a loader which allowed the music to play. So that gave people like myself and John Dunn and Martin Galway an opportunity to write some more music, you know. So that was anywhere where we could do that and have a play was great. And also, I think the artists would agree that it gave them a chance to set their stall with a bit of a loading screen, set the theme for the game. Without these loaders, we would have missed out on some extra content there that we had a chance to work on. So, you know, thanks for the loaders.
Yeah, it's been a big thing. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're aware. I speak to Martin Galway now and again. He's just left his job apparently. Where he's working, you know. Yeah, that was one day we turned up at work, and there was a white goods manufacturer, Ariston, and they had an advert on the telly, and it was dee 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 dee. I thought, hey, that's ours. They've nicked it. They haven't asked us. So we sent John Woods. Hey, John, they're using it on telly. Go and get us some money, kind of thing. You know. Off he went. He got about 300 quid because apparently it's okay to rip your music up. But that was the first time we think that actually the music you're doing, and it was loader music, and whether it was the beat of the loader music or whatever it was, we don't know. But actually, we started to feel famous, or the music guys did.
You mentioned the artists there, and I'm looking at Mark in particular. Mark, I remember we interviewed you on our podcast, and you were telling us about a rainy day in Dudley, where you went for a job interview and then decided to go home and ended up at Ocean. Do you want to tell us about how you came to be at Ocean, and then how you got into the art side of it, and any tools that you use, like the loader that you may have written yourself, or Simon might have helped you write, or whatever?
No, we didn't write anything. We left that to the programmers. We couldn't do anything like that.
Just don't write our names.
I ended up at Ocean because while I was at school, after school, I'd just mess around with graphics and stuff, and I'd amassed quite a collection of stuff. And I left school middle of '86, and I was working in a computer shop, selling Spectrum and Commodore and Amstrad games, and the boss was selling PCWs and things like that. And I used to take my stuff in and load it up, and they were like, "Oh, you should get a job doing it." So I was like, "Oh, what do you think?" So I sent off a load of tapes to different places. Most of the places I sent off to were just publishing houses, because there was no way of knowing who had in-house programmers and who didn't. So I wrote off to Mastertronic, Piranha, and they were like, "Oh, we don't employ people. They farm it out." And I didn't know, but I also wrote to an Ocean and Elite, So I got letters back from Nigel Alderton, actually, the writer of Chucky Egg. He was the one who was writing to me. I've still got the letters. So I went for an interview at Elite, and it was in Dudley, I think. Is that where it was?
Yeah.
Did you say?
Yeah.
And it wasn't a nice day, and it was raining, and it was just horrible, and it was a dingy office block, and I didn't really. It just didn't feel right. But then I got a letter from Ocean, and I was a big fan of Ocean because when I first got my Spectrum, I was playing stuff like. I mean, it took us ages to copy Daley Thompson's Decathlon. Good couple of hours. And me and my cousin were running around the room cheering once we'd got it done. You know, the 40th attempt. But I played them games at school, you know, like Cavalon and Hunchback 1 and 2 and Kong Strikes Back, Hypersports by Joffa, and so. To me, and then Ocean had this dodgy period. Just in '86, if you look at all the reviews they were getting, because they didn't have enough in-house staff, which is to cope with the games they were doing, which is how I ended up getting a job, because Gary Bracey got brought in to bring everything in-house, and he was amassing a team of in-house people to stop all the stuff like Street Hawk, Night Rider, and things like that happening. So I didn't let that bother me, the fact that they were absolute rubbish at that point in time. When I went for my interview at the end of '86, they were pretty, you look at the reviews they were getting 40, 50, 60% in Crash. But I still had this image of Ocean, as, just before that slightly, where they were getting good reviews, Daley Thompson's Decathlon, Super Test and stuff like that, that I still have fond memories of. So I went for my interview with my mum, because I'd never been on a train before on my own. It's a different age, wasn't it? You wouldn't, nowadays, but I'd never been out of town before on my own. So we went to, I got on the train with my mum,
He's a country boy.
went up to Piccadilly, got to Piccadilly and found Ocean, and it was just a really nice, we got taken downstairs by Lee Cowley, who come and met us at reception, and then met Gary.
Dobby.
Who?
Lee Cowley.
Hong Kong Cowley.
No, he's like Dobby, the house dwarf.
Oh, yeah. And it was just really nice. It was a nice atmosphere, even though there was no windows. Well, there were windows, because we were in the basement. There were windows, but you had a view of people's feet and bars.
So that was preferable to a rainy day in Dudley.
Well, yeah, but it was Ocean, wasn't it? And I got shown around all the new games that were being written. I remember seeing Short Circuit being written. Mike Lamb was just starting on Arkanoid, I think, or he was just finishing Top Gun or something like that.
What, you mean not RoboCop?
No, that was later on. And
The story then.
it was just a good atmosphere. So I didn't expect to get offered the job, but then a week later I got a letter through the post. I hadn't planned on moving to Manchester. I wanted to work at home, but it wasn't going to work, because that was what Gary was doing, getting everyone in-house. They've tried it out of house in 1986, and it wasn't working. So he was amassing an in-house team, and I was lucky enough to be a small, tiny part of that in-house team, and it was great. So that's how I ended up there.
Now, can I just check? Are you still the youngest employee? Because I know Matthew started at 16.
You started after me, didn't you? What year were you born?
72.
Yeah, he was younger than me. Yeah. Mark K. Jones had started like 2 weeks before me, and I was Mark R. Jones. So I was junior, he was senior, and then it was a nightmare because we ended up sharing a flat together. So going through each other's post. Is that for you?
Yeah, no. Part of what Mark mentioned about Gary Bracey putting the teams together. This is what I said about nobody knew what they were doing. Gary had, no one had ever set a team up. Gary's previous job was running a little computer shop, because I was working with Ian Weatherburn at the time, and Ian used to go in and get all his blank discs, and I remember going in with Ian, and he was like, "Oh, this is Simon Butler." And there's all these like spotty faced, probably you guys, spotty faced schoolboys, and they were all there, and they went, "Oh, it's Simon Butler, can you sign this?" And I was like, "What the bloody hell's going on here?" And so I ended up signing copies of Shadowfire and whatnot. And then the next time I see Gary, he's running development at Ocean. So that's what I mean. Gary knew nothing about man management. He knew nothing about getting licenses. He knew nothing about mixing with some of the bigger names, Spielberg and the likes in Hollywood. But that's what Gary moved on to.
had no experience, basically had to make it up on the fly, and I think he did a pretty damn sterling job. You know, he thinks I hold a grudge because he sacked me, but he was only doing the job. You know, he was just a messenger boy, and we've since made our peace. And I think that Gary did an absolutely excellent job in possibly the best software house that this country's ever produced. So.
Yes, you touched on something there, Simon, because getting back together and reminiscing and all this, it's wonderful, it's lovely, it's all pink and fluffy and everyone's happy. But you don't like everyone you work with. You don't like everyone you meet in life. So is there anything that we'll talk about the book a little more in a few minutes, but that you found out in the book that you thought, oh, I didn't realise that? Or what were your thoughts when the History of Ocean book was coming about? And what was your first point of contact? Was it Roger that called you and said, we're doing a book and we'd like to speak to you?
It was Chris. It was Chris. Chris got in touch, and basically I didn't want to go down as being the person that everyone thinks they know about Simon Butler, which is this sort of sour-faced old kraut, you know, or crab or whatever. You know, they would all say, "Oh, he's always so fucking negative," and yes, I was at the time, because
never shuts up.
no, because the industry did that to you. You know, it wasn't all hearts and flowers and little, you know, fluffy bunnies everywhere. It was an absolute bloody nightmare every day. Sometimes, I mean, for me, it was hard because I was working with kids. You know, and yeah, I've got kids of my own. But having to work with children every day, and their little tantrums, and it used to drive me mad. You know, and you just wanted to beat them to death. And several times, I go on record as I actually physically attempted to do that. You know, and
Mark survived.
Yeah, Mark survived. We came through unscathed, but it was hell. And anyone who says, "Oh no, Ocean was great, it was absolutely brilliant," it was exciting, but it was total chaos, and it was like a room full of frigging monkeys all screeching at each other. You know, and because 99.9% of them were male, you know, they were all. It was like a big pissing contest. You know, the testosterone was just bonkers. And poor old Gary's in the middle of it, trying to, you know, calm things down. We're screaming at each other. I mean, literally, punches are being thrown. So
it was the ringleader then when it was that shotgun in the beer in Gary's office.
I caused. I did.
Sprayed all over his ceiling.
I did get up to all kinds of shenanigans that I really shouldn't have, and I've done. But when the book came round, I didn't want to go down. Oh, here we go. Simon's going to go around. He's going to go slagging people off. And I could quite easily, but they could just do it just as easily with me. I was just a loudmouth, balding scouser who thought he knew everything. And I was wrong about everything except going bald. And so I basically said the core of my thing was that Ocean was great. It was a great time. Yeah, we went through hell. Absolute hell to get some of these games out. You know, sometimes with external people in movie studios, who are dealing with some of the biggest tossers on God's earth. You know, they just didn't have a clue about the industry because it was all new to them.
Because an 8 pixel by 8 pixel doesn't look like...
Yeah, why doesn't it look like Bruce Willis? You know.
It wasn't allowed to look like Bruce Willis.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. You know, or, I mean, I was given... One of my games, was in the 16-bit era. If it didn't get the green light from Walter Matthau, Dennis, it wasn't coming out. And the studio sent me one photo of Walter Matthau, which is why he walks across the game room. His body's going that way and his head's going pointing the other direction. So it's just stupid. We fought tooth and nail with each other and with external people. And it was just bonkers. But through it all, there was that thread that you achieved something, you'd done something. You went home and you think, oh, God, I could kill him. But, you know, and then you think, well, Jesus, you know, I got 2 8-frame walks done today, and I've got the ladder climbed up. I did good. It wasn't a bad day. So there was just the right balance of sheer and utter shite measured out against some pretty wonderful times. So, yeah, anyone who says that Ocean was, you know, sunshine and lollipops didn't bloody work there.
Anybody else with a comment?
Yeah, Simon painted a picture out of this sort of chaos and monkey screeching. I can relate to that, and being a young guy and sort of getting a chance to work with some of the people that you'd heard about and you'd admired their work as a youngster, and then realising that it was a fairly chaotic place to be, it was a bit of an eye-opener. But there was always a place where you could go to get away from that, and it just so happened that it was where the audio guys were. So we were always in our own little bubbles. We had our soundproof rooms, and we were shielded to a certain extent from some of the madness that was going on out there. So we had to make.
See you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we used to get people like Gary would drag people out of the audio rooms because they'd gone in there to sort of play on one of these, arcade game things. The things that you all know about. It was all. Remember, we used to get the cases. Yeah. Well, they used to sort of sneak off with them into the audio rooms. It was the only place you could go to get away from the prying eyes and all the rest of it and the madness. But we made madness of our own in there instead. But yeah, it was. I do remember it being sometimes quite chaotic and stressful. But we were to an extent as the audio people kept away from some of that madness.
Yeah. I've got to take issue a little bit with Simon. I mean, I really enjoyed myself. We used to have a laugh down in the cellars, I
You said
think.
the book, you didn't remember most of it.
Yeah, sure. We used to have a laugh down in the cellars, I've got to say. I think when we moved to Castlefield or whatever it was, I think it went a bit downhill then. But certainly down in the cellars, if you ever wanted a beer, you went out. You generally went out together and had a beer. There was not a huge amount of animosity. And there was a couple of things. I mean, people have tried to make up that we were fighting in ours. I think we didn't like some of the external stuff, some of the US gold, which was effectively our company, was being written somewhere else. And hang on a minute, we should be writing that stuff. And
You gave us the crap.
Well, yeah, let's just talk about. I had to do a game called Mr. Wimpy once. We'd just done this quick deal with Wimpy.
Sounds classic.
Yeah, and
I liked it.
yeah, 6 months. You said you had to write a game. 3 weeks I had. Just shy of 3 weeks.
All you had to do was copy Burger Time, though.
Well, absolutely. We're just copying Burger Time on the Spectrum. It's not as easy as it sounds. And I think I was doing the graphics as well. I was terrible at graphics. You take a look at Hunchback now. That's mine. That's sad. But 3 weeks, and it had to be shown in the shop in Piccadilly, Manchester, in the Mr. Wimpy's for the big launch. All the press were there and everything. And the night before, I hadn't finished it. And the last thing you do in a game is the completion level. So let's say what you do is you do 8 completely different levels, and then you replay them all again, put slightly more monsters on them, or give them more intelligence, or whatever, make it gradually harder and harder. And that was the bit that I was up to the night before. It was literally 11 o'clock at night, and I had to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning with tapes. So if you ever finish level 9, well, you can't finish level 9, and that's what I did in the end. It's just basically level 9. It's impossible to finish. And if you ever get to the top, then something else comes and hits you and you die. So apologies for anybody who ever bought Mr. Wimpy, but I only had 3 weeks, and yeah. That was my big confession. I've never told anybody but my sons.
Luckily, I only copied Mr. Wimpy.
Jim, any perspective on that from,
Yeah.
you'd describe yourself as maybe a bit of an outsider?
Basically, I was external.
Yeah.
So obviously quite honoured, I suppose, because I was after 85 and being external, considering all the people were supposed to be in-house, so I was lucky in that respect. By the way, Hunchback wasn't called Hunchback, it was called Castle Run, but because he did the graphics, I thought, Hunchback. I'm joking. It's probably better than my graphics. Yeah, with working external, I did get to go in to the dungeon quite a few times, and I found it really good, enjoyable. And what I did find was, although Simon said there was a lot of testosterone, that was probably one of the good things that did help make Ocean good. The reason being is all the programs say, I've done this routine, and then another one said, I've done it, but I've done it faster, or done it better. And they kept working against each other, trying to outdo each other. And I think that helped make the Ocean games faster and better and more enjoyable.
Bigger productive.
Yeah.
So we talk about things that maybe didn't quite make it into games, like the end and things like that. Is there anything you put in any of your artwork, for example, any of the loading screens, or in the actual game, and any Easter eggs, things like that, that maybe haven't come out that you know is there?
On Jurassic Park I put in Space Invaders on a keyboard combination on the console screen, and that was quite fun, although I got scolded by Gary Bracey for doing that.
How did he find out?
One of the guys was playing it when he walked past, and but I've written it. It took me about 5 hours one night. I thought, I've got to have a little Easter egg. I always have an Easter egg in my games, so I thought it was quite good fun, and used the characters from the console, so it's very light, very small.
Were you told under no uncertain circumstances not to do it again, or did he think about taking it out maybe? Or?
Yeah, he asked me to take it out. I said, yeah, sure. Of course I will, as always. And but yeah, there's quite a few little Easter eggs all over the place, but that was my favourite one.
Anything in artwork, any characters?
Yeah, the only thing I used to do, there's a website on the internet where they've removed all the there's a load. They'll have a loading screen, and then you hover over it, and then remove the attributes. But every single one of my loading screens has got something stupid on it. It's got all of them got a Beatles logo on it, but then there's all sorts of silly faces, and I used to write my friend's name in there and the phone number of my mum's house and things like that. But it's not a secret anymore, because you can go on this website, just click over and see these stupid little drawings.
I put John Gibson's face in the tiles in Nomad on the Spectrum. John's face sort of lent itself because it was like, you know, well, no, that would have been the 64. Oh, sorry, Lego sized. No, because John was like Skeletor, you know, so I always used to draw Grandad and put his cheekbones out, and so John's face is in the tiles as you go along through it. And I think because nobody could ever get to the end of the arcade machine combat school, we had to. Somebody said, "Oh, well, you know, we need the game finished by next week." So, but we can't, because this was how we did it. You know, because we didn't have YouTube walkthroughs in those days. We had got the arcade machines and had to stand there and play the bloody thing all the way through. And it didn't matter whether you had infinite continues. Some of those games were so bastard hard. You were just like, we can't get off this level. You know, there was nothing you could do. Just had to keep playing and keep playing and keep playing. And we just couldn't get to the end of combat school. So I made John Woods the sort of the evil villain at the end of the whole game. And I don't think he ever knew, and I don't really didn't give it to us anyway. So.
Yeah. I remember the first day that I started at Active Minds with Simon to help with this Total Recall mess. It was a company in Manchester City Centre, and it was just across on Princess Street?
Yeah.
But the first day I was asked to do a mock-up of the Spectrum screen for Ace magazine. So for the first time on the job, I had to design the stakes panel, design some pretend objects, design a couple of sprites. And just for a laugh, and because I was very, very immature, one of the objects at the bottom was a used female hygiene. What's it? With a white.
A mouse in a telescope.
A mouse in a telescope. Yeah. And I sent this off to Ace magazine just to go, I wonder if they print it. And they did print it, but they changed all the colours. So the red end was green, so they'd obviously noticed it. But see, I didn't even get in trouble for that. So there you go.
There you go.
So I mentioned the book briefly earlier. Oh, sorry, Jim.
Yeah, I did do one Easter egg in Cabal, and a few of you probably already know about it. Basically, at the beginning of the game, there's two versions of the game out, one with it in and one with it out. And if you press a certain set of keys, once it's loaded, the main character comes over, and there's like the guy from Operation Wolf, and he comes over and pisses on him, basically. Because we were all saying it was like there's a lot more going on in Cabal than there was in Operation Wolf and stuff, so just did it for a laugh.
Bit of satire. So, onto the book then. What were your feelings when Chris or Roger, whoever it was, probably Chris, contacted you first about doing the book? What were your thoughts about it? And this is for everyone along the line in turn. And then, what are your thoughts after it? How do you think it came out? Do you want to start at that end?
Oh, no, go on then.
We'll go right along.
I know what to say.
Surprise. You know, this is something I did years ago, and I mean, the stuff I'm doing now is trying to fix the software for the railways, all my guys are, and it sort of seems important now. But yeah, just surprised. Why would anybody be interested in us writing games like? Having read it, I'm actually quite fond of it now, because maybe I have got rose-tinted glasses about it, but it was a good time. I did have a laugh. It was hard work, but I had a laugh. So I think, and it's nice. I mean, we never really got pats on the back. There was a lot of going round about we all got paid huge amounts. We had fast cars. We didn't, not at Ocean. We got paid a going rate. We worked long hours, and we didn't find out, except for the magazine stuff, which we knew was sort of paid for, whether or not people actually liked our stuff. So we were very much in a bubble, and to see that in the book and to see that actually people want to read about it, I think that, yeah, that's sort of the biggest pat on the back for all the work we did. That's it.
Yeah, so I need to buy a copy today. That's what I need to do first. And go through. No, I don't think I am.
No, he's not.
No, I've not. I wasn't sort of hanging around the scene when all the talk was going on, so I didn't really know what was happening. I was just really pleased to hear that you get to hear a bit more about what these guys have been up to and how they went about achieving what they'd achieved, and some of the interesting stories behind it, and some of the politics and the business side, the entrepreneurial side, the creative side. It was good to hear that was going to get published and acknowledged. So I'm looking forward to reading it. I'll read it later, I'll let you know.
I felt really old being in a book, and just a few years before I'd been contacted by a museum, the PlayStation Museum, so that added together to make me feel quite old. But it's really nice to reminisce about these things and see that in the book. It's really well put together, looks really nice, so you should get a copy.
I just remember Chris telling me originally that he wanted to do a book on Ocean. I just didn't think. I knew people were interested because we'd been to shows like this. I think Bite Back was the first one we went to, and they just got bigger and bigger and bigger. But I didn't think there'd be enough interest for a whole book on one company. But then by the time I'd seen, I helped proofread it. I must have read it 10 or 12 times. The amount of times I had to change the spelling of Daley Thompson's decathlon to decathlon, it was a joke. In fact, I've got a little credit at the beginning that says my proofreading was a bit of a decathlon, but that's why, because every time decathlon was mentioned it was decathlon, and it was wrong. It was my graphic design training coming in.
Newsfield boys for you, can't spell.
But for me, I knew what I'd been through, and I knew, all my memories were in my head, and it was really good to hear everybody else's memories. Everybody else, there was lots of people in there who've not been interviewed before, so it's good to hear. Really interesting to hear everybody else's point of view, and the story of the company as well, because he managed to get interviews with David and John, which I remember him first going, "Oh, I'm going to get David Ward and John Woods," and we were like, "You won't do that. Just get a grip of yourself. It's not going to happen," and it did. So for me, that was really interesting because I didn't know any of that. I saw David and John occasionally at work, perhaps exchanged a couple of words with them back then, but I didn't really speak to them because they were the main men upstairs. When they came down, it was like tidy desks, put them coffee cups away, make sure you're doing something, make sure you look like you're doing something. So they were quite scary to me when I was a 16-year-old. But to read their story of how it all started, that for me was the coup of the book, the fact that he got interviews with David and John who had never been interviewed before about the history of Ocean. So it's good. I still read it now, even though I've read it hundreds of times. It will last forever.
Just read your own bit, or everyone.
No, I know my bit off by heart. I know everybody's bit off by heart. Like I said, I had to proofread it before it came out. Sick of reading it for a while, but it's a great book. even coming from somebody who was involved in it. If I wasn't involved in it, I still would have bought it. Simon?
Yeah. No, I mean, Chris asked me to contribute. And again, like Mark, I did a lot of proofreading on it.
Did you find any decathlons?
No, I wasn't. Well, I found a shed loads of spelling mistakes, and Roger's grammar left an awful lot to be desired on the David and John bit.
Is he it?
No, Newsfield, Notion boys, they don't mix. Yeah, because you've got talent in the room now. Oh yeah, God, Gordon Bennett, speak of the devil. No, I mean, I was like I said earlier, I was pleased, but I didn't want to sort of represent myself the way. Well, maybe I did it so that I could wipe the slate clean, because everybody said, "Oh, we've got memory of Simon Butler as being this miserable old get," and maybe I've come across as a miserable old get, but yeah, I wanted to basically sort of go on record as saying that it has been the most creative and exciting part of my career. I mean, I'm still doing it 30 years on, but Ocean was just, like I've said it before, it was lightning in a bottle. David and John didn't know what they were going to do. They didn't know, even Gary didn't know. You just got this bunch of kids downstairs, and I mean, that was the brief: make a game. That was it. And that was all that Gary could say to us. Couldn't give us any other help other than that. He'd say, "Oh, here's a license. Here's an arcade machine." I mean, okay, with an arcade machine, you had visual reference, but with a movie title, or even if they gave you, if you were lucky enough to be given carte blanche to do an original title, they just say, "Do a game." I mean, okay, they do that these days, but nowadays they'll say, "Oh, we want it to." I mean, okay, today they write around. Well, it's a sequel, it's a franchise, and they 9 times out of 10 they write for the hardware. Okay, we were doing that, but we didn't realise. We were trying to be creative. We were trying to create stories that kids would latch onto, trying to create environments and worlds and things. So that was what was exciting about Ocean. All the day-to-day sort of banging heads with egos and whatnot, little sort of teenage prima donnas. That was, what you had to go through, but it was worth it. So writing about it, I wanted to go down and say that in 30 years, I've never had a better time. Never fought so much. Maybe I fought because I was passionate about it. And it's all been sort of fairly awful since. I mean, some of the dunces I've had to work with since. But these dunces and these like dumbasses that I've come across around the world, I mean, literally, globe-trotted, and they've all said, "Oh, yeah, we remember Ocean. Oh, why don't you fucking copy them? Why don't you act like them, you bunch of idiots? But that was people admire what we did. They want to be like us, and they just don't know how. I don't know how we did it, but I'm glad we did it, and I'm glad that we went down on record as saying that we were part of it. I mean, David and John reaped the benefits, but yeah, they took all the risks. We didn't. So yeah, Ocean was pretty damn cool.
Probably going to cause a bit of controversy here. It should be your job, this. I first heard about the book from Dave East, because he was like the one that thought a book should be done about Ocean, because it was the pinnacle of the times. And so anyway, it got sort of onto Chris and Roger.
Yeah.
And then they obviously got in touch with me, and it was like an honour to sort of be in the book as well, with being an external. And so it was, like Simon said, it was the best time of my career as well. I mean, I'm still in the games industry now, 28 years later, and there was the magic of then has kind of disappeared in like the big companies. It's just not the same, which is obviously why I'm freelance now because I prefer it. It reminds me of the old days back when we were doing games for Ocean and stuff. To me, it was the best, most creative time of my career.
We've heard a couple of snippets there about what you're doing these days. We'll probably try and close with that, but we've got about 10 minutes now. If any members of the audience have got questions, you stick your hands up and shout out. Yep.
Firstly, thanks a lot for all your creative that helped poor 12-year-old, get through life, made it more interesting. My question is about, I think you touched on it some, about the licenses. Obviously, Ocean is known for all the license games it made. How did that work? Did you get much artwork? Did you work closely with the studios? Did they send you music? How did that happen?
In fact, I've got these folders over here, right? Answer party question. Of all the crap that I saved for years, and my mum was going, why did he throw that out? Right, and then like 5 years ago, it was all under glass cabinets at the Urbis at that Video Game Nation exhibition. But that was only a bit of it. But I've got some bits there of I stole off Gary's desk when he got a script for Total Recall. So there's a couple of, there's a letter and there's some storyboards.
Yeah.
So he gets stuff sent like that. But other than that,
well,
Simon, because he's more articulate than me.
Total Recall came sort of fairly late in the day. I mean, and that is a whole Q&A on its own. Honest to God, that is the stuff of nightmares, that particular project. But early on in the day, when it first started, I mean, we were excited at first, and then that excitement really pulled after a while, especially when you're in-house, and that was all you got. Movie license, with the occasional arcade machine thrown in. And we saw the external houses, special effects and people like that, and software creations. They were doing original titles. And we had original ideas, we just weren't allowed to do them. Simple as that. If you wanted to do original ideas, you left Ocean. You just had to. Now, the reasoning behind it is, manyfold, but it's totally logical. Your advertising is done for you. You do a game called Batman, you do a game called, not so much Platoon. I mean, I enjoyed Platoon, but the way it worked with Platoon was they sent me down to London to whatever movie studio it was, Warner's or whatever. And then, got enough beer for everyone, have you? That's a bit selfish, just to think about one for yourself. No, that's okay, no. We'll talk about this after, stay later. In those days, I mean, you didn't get any sort of info at all. It was, they're doing a movie. So I got sent down, saw the movie, and no word of a lie, I'm not trying to tell, gild the lily. I literally walked out into the daylight after Platoon, just thinking, how am I going to make that palatable for small children? And I just thought, they're mad. I just watched somebody bludgeon somebody's brains into strawberry jam, and I think, okay, got to turn that into a game. But that's what they did. If you were lucky, you got sent down, private viewing, and you had to come home, back up to Liverpool, and then write a design. So, it was, you did things like that.
Simon storyboards. I'm illustrating this, you see, carry on.
I'd go back, do all this. I mean, I did all this, took him into David Ward, and he was thrilled. But then you had sort of the other side of the coin to show how it can go wrong. I was called up, while I was still working on this, I was called up to David Ward's office, and Colin Stokes was sat in there. Got this brilliant idea, and I think round about the time Denton's had submitted Frankie Goes to Hollywood, which had been a really big hit. Made no sense to me. I think it just reflected how much strange tobacco was going around Denton Designs at the time. I know for a fact because I used to work there. And
I thought you were going to say used to take it.
No. And they said, Frankie's been a really big hit. So another band that really big at the time, U2 were thinking of doing a game about U2, the Joshua Tree. And Colin Stokes has said, been giving it a lot of thought. There's this tree, and that's as far as he got. And I just went,
fingers in your ears, please. I went, you're fucking joking, aren't you? There's a tree. Well, it's a Joshua tree. And Colin Stokes. Yeah, another whole Q&A there. But that was it. You had these licenses, and your advertising, your marketing was done for you. Ocean, it was all the industry. Like I said, Ocean bought their success. They could buy their advertising. They could buy premium advertising. I mean, everybody remembers the Psygnosis Mega Games because they were great adverts. You know, the game never surfaced, but by God, you all remember the adverts because Imagine spent all the budget on the bloody advertising, and that's what Ocean would do. They prime advertising. They put it everywhere, so it made real sense to get Warner's or Fox or whatever to do it for you. You know, even sort of subconsciously, it's on the side of a bus, Batman, also on computer games. And the kids want that, and they want it regardless of how bad it is. And I say that because I worked on Highlander.
Wasn't there an advert for Robocop, the computer game, at the beginning of the video?
Yeah. You know, so that's it. You know, there you go. But it caused all kinds of problems because we'd have these guys in the studios saying, main character can't die. So you're like, that's what every character does. I mean, Mario dies. You know, it's that phrase we have from our childhood. I died! But magically you come back to life again. Oh, I've got 3 more lives. You know, I died. But you can't do that. You can't. No. So you have to, their energy goes down. Or they lose enthusiasm. Which we were rapidly doing, getting more and more movie licenses. And it just carried on and on and on. You know, I mean, sometimes it came back to bite them on the arse, like Gary bounced in and he goes, got this great movie script. Radio Flyer. What's it about? Child molestation. There's this dad takes his son into the shed every Saturday night. Simon, knock something up. What? Yeah, I mean, has anyone seen Radio Flyer? Yeah, I mean, it touches on the, you know, it does it quite well, and it is one of the forgotten gems of that 80s era. But for the love of God, Gary, you know, and there's Gary, you know, having his picture taken with David Cronenberg in Nightbreed. Ooh, another stinker. But yeah, I mean, some of them were great, but some of them were absolute donkeys.
Thank you. We've got a couple of minutes left now, so if we can do a quick run all the way down the line and just maybe fill us in on what you're doing these days and whether it's retro-related, inspired or whatever.
Yeah, no, just as I mentioned before, the UK Railways, you might be surprised to know that we don't know where the trains are when they're moving.
Not running on a ZX Spectrum, are they?
Well, yeah. So something I wrote back in, I think it was 2000, does some of it. So we've got 32 billion to spend. I'm not working for Network Rail, I work for a company called ASOS, nothing to do with the medical, by the way. But we do the Olympics. So my job's just to design the software to make the railways run more better, due to finish in 2020.
So yeah, I started losing interest in video game music when the samples came in and all that sort of music. So it was around sort of 92, 93. I went on to work for Software Creations briefly. Had a good time there working with Tim and Jeff Follen. That was a great time. Then again, just sort of fell out of the industry. Went on to study music and then got into doing corporate IT. I'm sort of a Microsoft web developer now. Doing all sorts of websites and system architectures for different companies around the UK.
I went from Ocean down to NMS, which was mentioned by Gary Penn before, which was down locally in Walsall. Worked there for a few years and then down to Guildford to work on some motorbike racing games. The last game I worked on was Halo 3. And since then I've been doing financial software in the city, which pays the mortgage, and I still write retro games in my spare time. Tend to write sort of 80s style games, And one of my passions at the moment, every few months I do a game jam where I get to run a game in a day. And I do that with my kids, and that's quite a lot of fun.
I don't work in the software industry anymore. I manage houses that with people with autism living in supported living. So that's what I do as my day job. But in my spare time, I mean, I did a Spectrum game a couple of years ago, which was great fun. I never ever thought I'd do another Spectrum game. That was Dingo on the Spectrum that had been written by the people who were Ultimate originally. It's sort of been forgotten about, but that was really nice to do that. I did the graphics, the sound, the artwork, because I'd never done the artwork for a game before, and it all turned out really well. And I do a lot of restoration stuff. Like last year, we were sourcing Bob Waitlin's lost artworks, and we managed to find and clean up about between 10 and 15 of his artworks that had been stamped over when he went to Ocean to rescue them. So I like all that sort of stuff, preserving stuff, and I also run the Ocean and the Ultimate Play the Game Facebook pages as well, which have proven rather popular.
I'm still in the industry, such as it is. I've stayed horribly 2D, much to the sort of detriment to my bank account. I painted myself into a very small corner for many years, but it's picked up a while ago. Had several good years, and then it all went browser shaped. So which I dipped into that for a while. I'm just done 2D iOS clone this week. Took me 3 days. It was supposed to take 2. What else have I done? Oh, I've done a very adult 8-bit title that I'm currently working on. It's basically Leisure Suit Larry that's not uncut. It's very hardcore. Yeah, I didn't even know what it... But it, like, Phil says, it pays the bills. And it's all nice big pixels.
You learn new words every day.
Yeah.
New positions.
And new positions every day. Yeah, and I'm also working on a project of my own with some guys out in Germany. So.
Jim, to finish?
A couple of you know that I'm still in the games industry, 28 years on. I've just finished doing How to Train Your Dragons for a plug and play console, and in my spare time I've also been doing some retro games. There's a few on the list. Like in 2012 I did Pac-Man Miner Man, which is Mike Miner for the Pac-Man hardware. In 2013 I did a high-res racing game for the ZX81. I also wrote Jetpack for the Pac-Man hardware, or Jetpac-Man, and I'm thinking of doing either 3D Monster Maze next or 3D Death Chase for Pac-Man hardware. I'm also doing, I've had to put on hold, as quite a few of you already know, Double Dragon for the Specky. Yeah. Because A, I've been very busy with work, and B, because of the arcade games, I ported back in the 80s, well, late 80s, like Cabal and Midnight Resistance and Roadrunner. I made games for the Specky, which were clones of the arcade game, but I always wanted to make an arcade game, never had the chance, and then when it popped up, I jumped at the chance, and I've actually enjoyed it, because it's something I've always wanted to do for years and years and years. So I will be doing more. I mean, I'm still doing Wreck-It Ralph for the World Cup 90 hardware, and I've also got a working, almost finished version of the Specky version of Wreck-It Ralph, and I do hope to one day actually manage to finish an Amstrad port with 16 colours of Midnight Resistance.
Cheers, thanks Jim. Thanks everyone, and I'm sure you'll join me in thanking our Ocean panel, the second panel today. Can I just ask ask if anyone wants to speak to them or have a look at Mark's artwork. Can we just sort of move it out that way a bit and we can get set up for the next one? Thank you.
Dad, why are you into this retro rubbish?
This is Retro Asylum, the UK's #1 retro gaming podcast show. Shinobi on the Commodore C64. It's awful. It really is. The controls are broken.
Still looks like rubbish to me.